So I want to welcome to the stage two-time gold medal champion, Parra.
And I got to tell you, I've been doing this for about 20 years, and I got to tell you, in those 20 years, this is probably the coolest stage. I mean, look at the size of the screen. People used to always say, Derek, you look a lot bigger on TV, and now I know why. I mean, this is huge. Well, I know there are people here from not from Utah and from around the country who maybe don't watch the Olympics or never seen a skin suit up close or don't even know what a speed skate is. So it's for you as well as the ones who are familiar with the sport. I'd like to share a short portion of a video to hopefully give you an idea of what I did back when I was in my competitive days of racing, as well as hopefully bring you back to what it was like just moments before my gold medal race. So let's play the video.
He helped carry the World Trade Center flag in the opening ceremony. Then the next day, watched the Stars and Stripes from the podium. Parra kick-started American speed skaters with a surprise silver in the 5,000. Now, today in his specialty, he hopes to continue his inspiring Olympic journey. And here is the man who began this American medal haul about a week and a half ago with that silver in the 5,000. Now looking for more in this 1,500. Let's go to Andrea Joyce.
Dan, with his performance in the 5,000, Parra feels today that anything is possible. And instead of putting that race behind him, his coach, Bart Schouten, just told me that Derek has done a great job of using all the attention to psych himself up. He operates better that way. Add to that the fact that Derek skated the fastest lap of his life yesterday in practice at 24.8. And in Schouten's words, I am very confident the gold is in his reach.
Now set here in a specialty.
Okay, we're going to stop it right there. Don't worry, I'll get to it, don't worry. You know, if you would have asked me when I was a child of, is this going to make this work up? What I wanted to be when I grew up, I can tell you without a doubt that long track ice speed skating was not on the list. I mean, I didn't really see ice until I was in my mid-20s. And my story really begins as a young child in Southern California. My parents were divorced at an early age. My dad raised my brother and I, and we lived in a two-bedroom house in Southern California. And I got to tell you, I didn't think my life was had any significance. It wasn't any different than I would think any other child around that early 70s growing up would be. A typical day in my life, my dad was a correctional officer. He'd wake up about 6 in the morning. He'd get us up. He'd leave $1 on the table for our lunch. My brother and I would wake up, get showered, get dressed, eat breakfast. We had a key to our house on a shoestring we put around our neck. We'd lock the door. We'd walk the 6 or so blocks to school, go to school. We'd learn, play in recess, learn some more, come back home. I usually made a sandwich of some sort, like a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. Love those things, still do to this day. And I go outside and play in the streets all day, playing stickball with the neighborhood kids. And we'd use trees and manhole covers for bases, an old sock that was rolled up and wrapped with duct tape, and a broken broomstick. That's what we did, just played stickball all day long. My dad would come home about 6 o'clock, it would get dark, the street lights would come on, he'd whistle, I'd come inside, eat some dinner, watch some TV, do some homework, go to bed. That was it. Pretty insignificant, right? Well, my life seemed to change for me anyway when I was about 14 years old. My brother, who had a friend down the street, an older friend, took him to a roller rink one night. Anybody ever been to a roller rink before? Yeah, I'm sure. So I think roller rinks back there in the 70s and 80s were pretty much the same everywhere you went. A disco ball, lights, music, and a shade of carpet you never knew existed on the walls. Well, my brother went to a roller rink one night, and he came back, and he wouldn't shut up about how awesome it was. He talked about the disco ball and the lights and the music and everything, and we shared a bedroom and a bunk bed, and he just wouldn't shut up all night. And I was so excited. He got me so pumped up on this idea of going to a roller rink. And so being a younger sibling, I asked him, hey, can you take me next Friday? And of course he said no, because it wasn't cool back then, or maybe now, to take your little brother to the roller rink on a Friday night. So I begged him, and he made these empty promises like, sure, I'll take you if you take the trash out when it's my turn, or you'd mow the lawn, or do any kind of his chores that we had. But he would never take me. And I kept begging, and finally my dad, who had a pretty short fuse, got tired of me begging, and one day he went, shh, that's it. You're taking your brother, and I'm like, that's the end of it. So I remember being so excited. I was getting ready to go to the rink that Friday night. My brother was not really happy. He was pretty mean to me the whole week. But that Friday night finally came. We went to the roller rink. My dad dropped us off and asked us asked my brother what the price was for admission to skate rental. My brother said $375. My dad gave us $4 each, a big spender. We went in there, paid for my admission to skate rental, walked in, and it was just like my brother said. It was the coolest thing. It was a disco ball, lights, and music, and for a 14-year-old boy, there were some girls there, so it was kind of cool. But I remember going in there and seeing kids that weren't my color or didn't look like me. Met kids whose parents weren't divorced, and it was a whole new world for me. The first problem became money, though. A bit of money. I had a quarter to my name, and my dad gave me $4, a quarter to my name. I wasn't very good at video games because we couldn't afford an Atari back then. And so I put my quarter in the video game machine. 30 seconds later, all my men were dead. I kind of just sat there on the side of the roller skating floor watching the kids go by underneath the hot lights, and was thirsty. But I didn't have any money to get anything to drink. Well, luckily, that Friday night, and I learned every Friday night, about 9 o'clock, the DJ would turn all the white lights on, clear the floor, and the skate guards would bring out cones and mark off a track. Just safety cones, orange safety cones, mark off a track. And the DJ would start inviting people out, 7 and under, 8 and 9, 10 and 11. And if you went out there and you raced in a 2-lap race in your age group and you won, you got a ticket for a free drink and a snack bar. That's why I started speed skating. I was thirsty. But it wasn't like I got out on the floor, and clouds were parting and angels were singing and doves were flying or anything like that. I was an athletic kid and I played stickball in the streets. So I went out there you guys remember those brown skates with the rock hard wheels and looks like a piece of gum for a toe stop, right? I went out there, I was on those, and I got in the starting line. I looked at the other skaters. I remember kind of getting this kind of track stance and watched them, and I looked up at the skate guard. He blew the whistle and I took off. And to my surprise, I was in the lead coming down that first straightaway. Well, I went to the turn. I wanted to go left. My skates pretty much wanted to go right because they've been run by 10,000 kids before me. So I pretty much went straight through the turn, went really wide, and everybody behind me passed me, and I got last, which made things worse because now I was tired and thirsty. But you know what? It didn't matter. I was hooked on roller speed skating. Don't know what it was. My brother stopped skating at that point when I started going. No one else in my family has skated ever since. I have a 20-year-old daughter I couldn't pay to skate when she was growing up, but I just loved being on skates. So I remember telling myself, I got to get back and win that race. And I came back the next Friday, and the next Friday, and the next Friday. And when my dad couldn't afford for me to go back, I would take that $1 bill off the table that he had for our lunch, and I put it in my pocket or put it in the Friday night fund. And I would go out and make a bologna and bread sandwich, wrap it in a napkin, and put it in my pocket and go to school with that. That was my lunch. I just wanted to get to that rink so I can try to win that race. And I got better as time went on. It was time where I maybe won the start and went to the first turn, but I got passed. Maybe a time where I was, in first place for a full lap and I got passed. And there's maybe one time I was in the first place at the very last turn, but I always got passed and never won that race. But what I noticed was all the kids that were going back to the snack bar with that drink ticket in their hand and celebrating their victory lap, they all had on speed skates. Now, back then, speed skates were lower, stiffer boots for more support, bigger, grippier wheels that if you spun them, they actually rolled. They had adjustable toe stop for the start. So I knew if I ever wanted to win that race, I had to get a pair of speed skates. So I got a paper route. I started mowing lawns. I was selling clothes. I was babysitting, whatever I could do. And after a while, I finally got up enough funds to buy my first pair of speed skates. And I was going back to the rink and practicing. And it wasn't before too long that I was winning these races. And a stack of tickets this thick. And it wasn't anything special. It was just one of those raffle tickets that you've seen on those big rolls. That's all it was. But for me, it was like a gold medal. I remember it was a great way to meet kids. I'd be lying to you if I didn't go up to the cutest little roller skating girl there and say, hey, you want to skate couples? Yeah. Maybe after the song's over, we'll go back to the snack bar. Drinks are on me, kind of thing. It never worked, but I really liked skating, right? So I kept skating, and as I was winning these races, I got to meet some people, and one of the first persons I met was the rink manager, who was actually the DJ and the speed skating coach. His name was George Catone. George saw me coming by and goes, hey, what's your name? And I said, my name's Derek. And he goes, you ought to be a speed skater. And I looked at him and I said, well, isn't that what I'm doing? And he says, well, no. And George sat there that night with me and told me about the world of speed skating. And if I worked hard and I got to be pretty good at skating, I'd go around to local meets and regional meets. And if I trained harder and got better, I could go around to national events and race against kids my age from around the country. And if I got to be the best, I can go around the world, represent Team USA on skates. Now, here it was, 14 and a half years old, almost 15 years old, and I'm hearing stories about going around the world on skates. This big door in my head was opening up with the opportunity to do that, because I'd never really been outside of my 4-block radius, because I had to be within an ear's distance of my father's whistle, because if you had a dad like mine and he whistled and you didn't come home, you were in big trouble. So here I am 7 miles down the road across the train tracks in a better part of town, and I'm hearing these thoughts about going around the world. So I looked at George and I said, what do I got to do? He goes, you got to join the speed skating club. So I did. And luckily, my journey almost was derailed before it began, but a lot of people along my path really made a difference in my success. And the first person I'd like to bring out with, please welcome to the stage, Mr. Steve Cecil. Steve out. There he is. Steve, thanks for coming out. Steve, don't hate me, but this is Steve and I when we were younger. Check out those tight shorts, right? So, and no, we're not flexing to make our muscles look bigger as we're in the picture. But Steve was one of the first athletes I met, club members I met when I joined the team. And him along with his brother and his mom, Jean, really paved the way for me to skate. I mean, my dad could never take me to the roller rink, and Steve's mom took me almost every day to the roller rink. Steve was really the one that taught me about teamwork and camaraderie and really loving the sport. I had a passion for a sport that I didn't realize, but he taught me to love the sport, and we grew up together, and he's like a brother to me. And I still stay in touch with him all these years later. He was actually here for the games in 2002. So thanks for coming, Steve. I quickly got caught on the sport. I actually won my region that year, got to go to nationals with Steve. It wasn't a great event for me. I basically got there and went through all my races and didn't make it out of my heats, maybe made it to a semi. We came back, trained again, and went to the next year, and same results, nothing really exciting. Went back a third year, and again, wasn't really good. After 3 years of skating, wasn't really good. I don't know what it was, but all the kids from back east, from Ohio, Michigan, New York. Anybody here from those states? Yeah? Okay, don't take this personally. Everybody that I've met, every kid I met from those states was really good at two things, either bowling or speed skating. I don't know if it's because it's so cold over there, you guys got to go indoors in the winter or what, but now we had strip malls and beaches in California, but every kid kicked my can out in the track from those states. You know what it was? Well, on my third year of nationals, I was out there and I was sitting dejected in kind of a seat like this in what we call a heat box, where the athletes get on and off the floor for the races. And a person I had met a couple years before, named Virgil Dooley, came up beside me. Here's a picture of Virgil and Sue. Virgil and Sue were very known in the speed skating world, in the roller speed skating world. And Virgil came up to me and he said, "Hey, nice effort out there, Derek." I met him at a training camp in Colorado Springs. And he says, "Great effort, but you don't really know how to race." And I looked at him and I said, "Gee, thanks, Virgil." And Virgil was right. My typical strategy was, I'd say it's a 20-lap race. I'd take off, get a half lap ahead, and all the skaters in the pack would be over watching me half a lap behind me. And sure enough, as laps were winding down, they'd pick up the pace, pass each other, catch me, pass me, and I'd get last. It was my signature move. Did it every time, it never worked. And Virgil saw that. And so Virgil said, "Hey, you just got to learn how to race. And if you ever get serious, give me a call." Virgil was known for bringing kids to his club in Florida. He lived in Florida. He was from Michigan, incredible bowler, but now lived in Florida and had this huge team of athletes. And I knew his name because every year at Nationals, you'd hear first place in whatever division, coached by Virgil and Sue Dooley. I just knew his name, everybody, well-respected guy. So I don't think he ever thought twice about that, but I couldn't stop thinking about that. So I came home back to California, went back into high school, was a senior in high school, and I realized that I could graduate early because I was taking accelerated courses throughout my high school career. So I struggled with the decision, like, what am I going to do? My whole life was in California. My friends, my family. I finally had a date, started dating a girl named Cindy Arden. Like, what am I going to do? Am I going to leave all this? I wasn't really good in skating, but I was so passionate about it. And I struggled with the decision, and I knew there's one person I could ask that would give me great advice, and that was my mom. So please welcome my mom on stage, Maria. Gotta give her a hug, sorry. Thanks, Mom. Just kidding. My mom, she was a bit of a pioneer herself. She enjoyed running, marathon running, and for years had chased that dream of hers and ran marathons all over the country and in some parts of the world, and actually won the Marathon of Spain when she was younger. Check her out running. My mom and I had been close. Although my parents were divorced, I was closer to my mom than was my dad. I sat every day at the dinner table with my dad, but he was very rigid and not very open to conversation. And then just the opposite, my mom and I were very open with conversation. We talked about anything and everything and was always there in my life. So I knew when I had to make a big decision, I would talk to her. And I remember her telling me, you got to do this. You don't want to look back years from now and say, I would have, or I could have, or I should have. And with that advice, I bought a one-way ticket to Florida. I packed a bike, a bag, and I had $200 in traveler's checks. And I went. Virgil picked me up at the airport, took me back to his house. I remember walking into his hallway at his house, and there was a sign over his hallway that said, go train or go home. Yeah, right, whatever. So I put my bike in the garage. I basically was renting a room for him for $15 a week. It was a triple bunk bed that he had made himself that you had to kind of squeeze to get into. And I had basically one drawer of a 3-drawer dresser that I could have my stuff in. So I was there that first day. I was putting my things together. Virgil comes over and he knocks on the door and he says, hey, Derek, you might want to get going to practice. And I looked at him and I said, well, what time are you leaving? Because back in California, Steve's mom took me to practice. Well, at that time, Virgil says, well, I probably should have told you about this before you moved out here, but if you're going to live in my house and train on my team, you have to ride your bike to practice before you can skate practice, or you can't skate practice. Now, Virgil lived on Newport Richey, Florida, on the Gulf side of Florida, and the rink that we skated at was in Tampa, Florida, 32 miles away. Yeah, that's what I said. I had never ridden 32 miles in my life. I mean, maybe Steve and I rode 32 miles to go play video games at someone's house or something, or go to a fast food place to eat something, but I had never ridden 32 miles to practice, just to skate practice. And so I was lucky there were 2 athletes that were living in the area and in the house. There was a girl named Sheila Gladhill and a guy named Eric Licata. And halfway through the ride, I was absolutely spent. And it got to the point where Sheila had a ride in front of me to block the wind, and Eric Licata rode behind me beside me with his hand on the small of my back, and he pushed me for 16 miles because I couldn't move my legs. I had nothing in my body. I was totally depleted. I got to Tampa, to the rink, and I was wearing what I call my salt tuxedo. You know when you're sweating and all the salt rises to the top of your clothing and it gets all flaky and white and nasty? Yeah, that's what I had on. If you can picture me like this, it's completely destroyed, and I had this white salt tuxedo on. I changed out of it, got my roller skating gear on, and went out on the floor and just tried to skate the practice, and I must have fallen 6 times. It's my first day. I got, just out of pure fatigue, I'd go into a turn, my hands on my knees, someone would put their hand on my back, and I would collapse. I was so exhausted. I got kicked, and you know where, I got stepped on, rolled over, and I remember all the kids looking at Virgil going, who is this guy, and why is he here? It was embarrassing. The next step, or the next, challenge was money again. When you're living at home, back in and this is 1988, 87, 88, you have $200. It goes a long way, but I was living across the country. I was paying for meat fees, coaching fees, food, rent, and in about 2 weeks, I was broke. I had nothing left. I got to the point where I was actually asking Virgil actually writing him IOUs, like I owe you a can of soup, I owe you a Hot Pocket or a Pop-Tart, whatever he had in his refrigerator that he could spare. I was even eating his last year's frozen Krispy Kreme donuts that were in the freezer in the garage. I would just, don't laugh, it's not funny. Just kidding. So I'd go out there, put them in the microwave and eat those, and that was my food for the day, or my breakfast, lunch, and dinner. I couldn't find a place that would allow me to work the hours I needed to train the rest of the day. But luckily, there was a McDonald's being built just outside of a subdivision, and I put in an application, and a few weeks later, I got hired, my first job. Anybody ever here work at McDonald's before? Yeah? All right. 1? Wow, less and less these days. 2, awesome. I was a guy of the crew member. My job was to come in the morning, turn all the heating vats on, all the grills, and put Teflon sheets on and crack 100 or so eggs for the egg sandwiches, make the batter, pull out the buns and everything like that, so that when the crew came in right before opening, we were ready to go. But as you know, in any job that you get hired for, you won't get a paycheck for another 2 weeks. So that was 2 more weeks that I didn't have any money to eat, and it actually got to the point where I was eating the trash out of the trash cans at McDonald's to stay alive. But don't get me wrong, it wasn't like I was sneaking in at night, when no one was around. I found a loophole in the mixed system on the first day. And those, wait, is anybody here affiliated with McDonald's in any way? No? Okay, don't say anything. Well, who's eaten here at McDonald's before? Thank you for your honesty. Okay, so when you go to McDonald's, and I was the guy in the back, I'm making the Egg McMuffins, there's a cashier up front, and behind the cashier is a heating bin. So what happens, this is our policy, I learned on the first day, I make 4 Egg McMuffins, I put them in the heating bin at 8 a.m., I have to put a number 2 behind those 4 Egg McMuffins because at 8:10, the 2 is for 8:10, if those sandwiches aren't eaten, they'll throw them away because they're not considered fresh anymore by McDonald's standards. So the first day, I am starving in the back, making these Egg McMuffins. The manager comes by, checks out the heating bin, sees the clock, pulls the number, puts it back on the rack, gets those 4 Egg McMuffins, throws them in the trash. I remember saying looking at the other workers going, is this guy serious? Really? Like, I was starving. Well, sure enough, about 10:45 before changeover, the manager comes by and says, okay, who wants to take the trash out? And I said, I will. So I went over there and got the trash from the behind the counter and the bathrooms and the lobby, and the trash bags from behind the counter, I would double knot. I would take them in the big gray whale, roll them out to the back, where the dumpster's at, and when no one was looking, I would search through, throw the trash away, and I'd find those double knotted bags, rip them open, search for those Egg McMuffins, and I would chow down until I was McFull. I was pretty embarrassed for a while doing that, but the passion I had for skating was motivating me more than anyone else or anything else could. I wanted to see where I can get in this sport. Well, things got better. I got my first paycheck, started paying back Virgil, my IOUs. I got moved up to fries. The big bucks started coming in. That was a joke. And I had started being able to buy groceries and had good nutrition. And I started thriving on these bike rides. And at one point, I was leading the whole 32 miles to the rink. And I remember getting up in the morning going, the Derek Parra bus is leaving. And the kids had to jump out of the house and get on the bike or I was gone. And they would sit behind me and I'd pulled everybody in my draft to the rink. Well, things got better. By the end of that year, with Virgil's coaching and his guidance, I made a U.S. tryout and actually made a U.S. team for the first time in 1989. And I was on the team from 1989 to 1996. And in that time, I had won 18 world titles, set 2 world records, and was the most decorated athlete in the sport of roller skating. But the one thing I never had a chance to do was compete for an Olympic medal. And over the years, I had won world titles. This is my world championship photo on quad skates, the 4-wheel skates. The years later, when inlines came into our sport, you guys remember in the 90s, there were 5K and 10K fun rolls for families all over the country. I actually was hired by the company Rollerblade to be an ambassador, and I was starting to get a paycheck for being a speed skater, which was the greatest thing. I started to be able to fund my love for the sport. So I was traveling around the world, and actually more around the country, racing inline skates. Then they got into our sport, our national governing body, our international body. So I was racing inlines around the world, winning titles as well. And actually, in 1995, I was the leading medalist at the Pan American Games, winning 5 golds, 2 silvers, and a bronze of all sports at those games, which at the time was the second biggest summer sporting event to the Summer Olympics. And then the last race, my 5th gold, I actually got hit by the pace vehicle and was still able to win in a marathon. I think the headline read something like, he had to get hit to be legit. It must have been an MC Hammer reference or something, I don't know. But all this time I had an Olympic bug in me. Going to the Pan American Games was my first Olympics type experience. And I was hoping that the games in 1996 would include roller sports in Atlanta because we had the big boom of inline skating. Well, to back up a little bit, a friend of mine, Casey Boudier, who was also an inline skater, who was on the team Rollerblade squad with me, he got tired of waiting because since 1985, probably the powers that be at USA Roller Sports were saying, we're going to be in the next Olympics, or the next one, and it's 2022, and roller sports is still not an Olympic sport. I think skateboarding is, but not roller speed skating. So my friend Casey, he got kind of tired of waiting. He went, at the time the inlines came into our sport, he was living in the Northwest in Tacoma, Washington, and skaters from around the country were going to ice rinks to learn how to skate on a bladed skate because it was similar to a roller skating or an inline skating bladed skate. So Casey went there. He did got it kind of caught on pretty well. And he went to Milwaukee about 2 months before the 94 Olympic trials in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And he shocked the American speed skating world and won the distance trials. And he got to go to Lillehammer, Norway in 1994 to skate. And although he didn't qualify for the race that he earned the spot in, because Dan Jansen, do you guys know the Dan Jansen story? You guys ever heard Dan Jansen? A great American speed skater, very quickly. He was the man to be. He was fourth in, I think, 84 in the men's 500 meter at 18 years old. He came back the next Olympics. The night before he was supposed to race, his sister died of leukemia. His family decided to tell him. He came out the next day in the race he was supposed to win, and he fell and crashed. A few days later, he skated 1,000 meter, fell and crashed. Came back 4 years later, still the man to beat, still has 2 bad races. Comes back 2 years later in the games in 92 in Lillehammer, Norway. I'm sorry, 94 in Lillehammer, Norway, and has a bad race again. But he had a 1,000 meter, which he had been training for as well, and the 1,000 meter was 2 days after a 1,500 meter event that he qualified for. So he scratched the 1,500 meter event. He ended up winning the 1,000 meter event. Great story of perseverance. And Casey, who was there, got to step in his place in the 1,500 meter. So in 1994, Casey called me from Lillehammer, Norway, and said, "Dude, I'm skating the Olympics." And I was green with envy. That was my dream, and he was living it. But I was still, again, #1 ranked in the world. I was waiting for the games to come out, roller sports to be included in the games in 96. And in 96, when it didn't happen, I had to make a choice. What do? I had won every distance at the World Championships, but I didn't have an opportunity to go for that Olympic medal. So in 96, I went to Milwaukee, Wisconsin. My mom came along, actually. That's a horrible picture of me. I hate that technique right there, but I basically put blades on my inline skating boots and went out there and skated with some skaters, kind of tried to pick it up a little bit. I qualified for a national event a few weeks later, but again, it wasn't like I stepped on the ice and clouds were parting and angels were singing and doves were flying. I was an elite athlete at that point in my life, and I was a skater, but not a skater on the ice. It was really embarrassing because you guys know when you cut like steak or meat on a plate and it screeches with a knife? So the pushes are different in the two sports, and when I would push, the bottom of a speed skating blade is flat. So when I would push, it would slide across the ice and make this noise. So you could actually sit in the stands. You can probably ask my mom. You can sit in the stands and close your eyes, and you can hear me going around the track going. It's not funny. And it was embarrassing because I could not get it to stop, but I was in such good shape as a lead athlete. I was able to hang on, and I was the best of the rest. I got 2 bronze medals. Casey and a guy named Dave Tamburino were 20 seconds ahead of me, which is almost a lap. But I won 2 medals. I thought, this is great. I got up on the podium. I was super excited. Got the medal. No one said anything to me. There was no invitation. I got back on a plane, and I went back to Delaware, where I was living at the time, with Virgil, because I had followed him from Florida to Maryland to Delaware. And so now I'm with Virgil here in Delaware. And I get a call a couple weeks later because I was kind of planning what I was going to do with my life now. Am I going to go to college? I was helping them run the roller rink there in Delaware. And I got a call from Gerard Kempkers, who was the national team coach, and says, by virtue of your performance, we have a discretionary spot on the team. It's not funded, but if you want to take a spot, you'll be skating with the best skaters in the country in the Olympic Games in Nagano, Japan, in a year and a half. What do you want to do? And I said, what do I got to do? He says, you got to move to Milwaukee. So I think in a week I had gotten out of my lease, I packed up a U-Haul, and I drove to Milwaukee. I arrived there, and I trained for the next few years, a year and a half. And in my time, I had saved about $30,000 in my life savings at the time from all my race winnings and things like that with Team Rollerblade. In a year and a half, I went through $30,000. I was broke again. I was paying for travel, equipment, and just rent and living there. And again, it was an unfunded position. So I had to go back to doing just kind of crazy odd jobs. I was painting fences. I was babysitting for people that didn't need to go on a date, but they would, so I could babysit their child to make $20 or $30 to pay my rent. One of the weirdest jobs I had some friends that were roller rink owners in the area. I knew them from my roller skating days, and they had a disco night, and they needed a mascot, so I was Disco Daddy. Yeah. It was the coolest thing. It was the coolest thing. Like, people didn't know who I was. I came out, I grew a little chin strap beard. I wore some of those glasses and a medallion and that big wig, and I would come in like this into the roller rink and use words like groovy and cool and yeah, man, and I'd go out there and skate on the roller skating floor and just entertain the people. And everybody would say, like, who is that guy? And the owners would say, oh, he just loves disco music. I don't know. And so they paid me for it. So it was great. It was another one of those things that I wouldn't have been able to step forward if it wasn't for the help of these people. But, again, I worked hard. I wasn't progressing as fast as I'd like to. But in 1998, I made the Olympic team. I remember getting my first Olympic bag, and it had all the clothing. It was cool. I got my first USA skin suit. I remember putting on and checking myself out in the mirror, at home. I was putting myself on like that. Don't judge me. But I was just like this looks really cool. I've been training for years for this, right? So I get to Japan. That's where the games were. I remember calling my parents saying, I'm going to the Olympics. So they immediately try to get tickets. I'm in Japan 10 days before the event. We're practicing and everything. And I qualified for the 5,000 meters, which was the first day's event of the games. So I'm out there, the day before the event starts, the games start, and I'm warming up, and I look over on the side of the rink, and I see my coaches arguing. I see kind of hands flying with some officials. And when I got to the games in Japan, I was a 32nd ranked skater in that distance, and only the top 32 men in the world get to skate that race. So I just made it. Well, that night, the night before that day of my race prep, the validation committee goes through and checks all the times that are entered. And the day before the race, you get a pairing sheet which has which lane you're in, who you're racing in, and what time you race. Well, my name wasn't on that list, and my coaches were arguing that. What had happened was a skater from Kazakhstan, his team leader, misentered his time. And he was officially 0.012 seconds faster than me. So on the day before my race, I was switched from a competitor to a spectator. I sat there, broke, 20 years old, in Japan, at the Olympics, and I couldn't race. I was devastated. I tried to be a good teammate, because my teammates were living out their Olympic dreams. I was a gopher guy. I was going for a water bottle or carrying a bag, whatever it was, try to help out. But again, I was devastated. I remember going, 20 years old, finding a little corner between the Norwegian house and the Canadian house, and I tucked back in a little corner, and I crouched down there, and I was crying like a baby, 28 years old. I'd given up so much to get there, and I couldn't race. I didn't feel like a true Olympian. So came back to the U.S. I wasn't really sure what I was going to do. I knew I could do it physically. I felt like I could do it physically, but my window of opportunity was slowly closing because I was getting older. At this time, I'm 28. Most skaters are done by 28 or 30. I knew the hard part for me was financially, trying to find the funds to financially support myself. Well, luckily because I was an Olympian and I went to the Olympics, I qualified for a job program by the Home Depot. Some of you may remember the commercials back then. It was a great program with the U.S. Olympic Committee. Home Depot hired about 197 athletes at the time, and we would work part-time and get full-time benefits. So I had to do 1,040 hours a year, and I would do that all in the summer if I could, and in the fall, so I could focus on racing in the winter. And things immediately got better. I started having a better routine. I had nutrition. We had health insurance. So the next year I went from 33rd in the world to 19th and 20th in the 5,000 meter and 1,500 meter races, which I was starting to do well at. And the year before the Olympics, in a test event at the arena we were going to race at the Olympics, I was a silver medalist in the 1,500 meter. So things were going really great. Right? About that time, U.S. Speedskating asked all the athletes to move to Utah to get used to the ice and the altitude. You guys realize the differences with altitude and the thin air. And the ice is much faster here, so just by the virtue of its altitude. So we came here, and that's where I met a ton of great people. Please welcome to the stage Mr. Mark Norman. Thank you, Mark. So Mark was actually a former speed skater years before I ever started speed skating, had an injury, came out to Utah years before the games to be a ski bum, really, and a climber, as he says. But he actually is the new executive director of USA Climbing, so his dreams were accelerated as well. But he came out here, and he ended up being the ice miser, or head technician. That's him on his ice chair back there. And he was in charge of the ice for the entire year before the games and after that. Ended up being my boss at one point and hiring me for the position I'm in now. But he, along with so many other volunteers that were coming in on the weekends to help us race, have some practice races leading up to the games. These are just volunteers that have been probably volunteering for 20 years now, who out there, whether they're holding a watch or they're putting down cones or doing photo finish results. These people all became part of my team in helping myself and the rest of the skaters try to hone their craft for the games that would be held in that building. So thank you, Mark, again for all that you did. So things were getting good. Training was going really well. And there's always something that happens, right? September 11th, 2001. Our country was attacked. I'm sure everybody here knows exactly where they were on that day. I was actually married at the time, and my wife lived in Florida because we couldn't afford to live in Park City together, let alone we were struggling living in Milwaukee. So the year before the games, when I came to Utah, she went to Florida to live with her family. And every 6 weeks, I would fly back there to visit her. And at that point, she was pregnant with our daughter, Mia. So I arrived in Florida on September 10th, and the next morning, the world changed. And I gotta tell you, it rocked me to my core. That tragedy affected me like nothing ever has in my life. I always felt like very patriotic throughout my whole career as a skater and in just my life of wearing the stars and stripes and going out there competing in an athletic field. It's kind of like going to war for me, I guess. And even in those days that I was having the worst times where I was eating out of trash cans, things like that, I always thought that the next day would be better. This is the first time in my life I didn't know what the next day would bring. And I was just depressed. I sat in front of that TV for 10 days looking at something that would hopefully like bring somebody out who was alive. And I didn't want to go out and train. Didn't want to do anything. I found myself at times at a stoplight just crying, thinking about these victims, this tragedy. And here we are like 5 months before the games. I come back to Utah, and I tell you, I was embarrassed to be a speed skater. Embarrassed and ashamed to be a speed skater because it didn't mean anything to me at that point. For my entire life, I had put so much value on literally going around in circles. That was my self-worth. So I got back to Utah and I told my coach, I don't want to skate anymore. I can't do this. And he tried to talk me out of it. He brought the team on to what would be the finish line. We all held hands in a moment of silence. And I remember opening my eyes and I had tears in them. I was crying. I skated around a lap and got off the ice and went to work at Home Depot. And there I was trying to work. I just really couldn't function that day. I told my supervisors, hey, you might want to give this job program to somebody else who's going to be there. I don't think I'm going to be there. I just I couldn't focus on myself. All I could think about were those victims and the families that were left behind. So immediately I was sent some sports psychologist numbers. The USOC was having people call me, and for the next few weeks we were talking about it. And in the end I decided to skate, but it wasn't going to be about me. I knew that if I'd skated in the races that I could qualify for, and that was a 5,000 meter race, which is about a 6-minute race, and the 1,500 meter race, which is about a 2-minute race, that means I would have 8 minutes to hopefully, if I was on TV, to hopefully give those victims and their families, or the families of the victims, something to cheer about for 8 minutes. That was my whole motivation. So that was my thought. Every time I went on a bike ride or a race or a training session, I thought about them. And if it was bad, it didn't matter. I was thinking about them. And that brought me back on track. And the next thing you knew, the games were here. The buildings were wrapped in images of Olympic athletes. I remember getting prepared, being on the ice again. I qualified for the 5,000 meter race, which is on the first day. And I remember coming out of my warm-up, back to the locker room, and my coach comes up to me, Bart Schouten, and he gives me a phone. And he says, you're going to want to take this. It was another notification. I didn't know what to think at that point. But the call was from a guy named Greg Harney from the Olympic Committee. And Greg immediately says, Derek, how you doing? I met him at one point a year earlier. He says, Derek, I need to let you know that you've been voted by your peers, all the American team, to be one of the 8 athletes to carry the World Trade Center flag into the opening ceremonies. And you want to know if you accept. And without hesitation, I said yes, absolutely. I felt as if I was drawn to that moment. There was a purpose that I would hold that flag. My teammates were a little bit skeptical. They're like, are you kidding me? You're going to give up your legs to hold a flag? And I said, yes, Like they didn't get it. Because for an athlete, the opening ceremonies is a 6-hour ordeal. For you at home, you're watching on TV, and you're lazy boy, with your popcorn and your drink, listen to Katie Couric and Matt Lauer talk about the events at Center Ice. That's about 2 hours. For an athlete, it's kind of like this. You go to the Olympic Village, and you sit and wait there for your U.S. speed skating team to gather. And Paulo Ono's there, and he's got to do his hair, and it takes forever, and he's late. I'm just kidding, as you can tell, I'm jealous. And so once you get all your American team together, you go to a different part of the village, and you wait for the rest of the U.S. teams. The U.S. snowboarding team, the U.S. downhill team, the U.S. curling team. Yes, curling is a sport. And then you go, at that point, over to another place in the village, and you wait for all the teams of the other countries, all the teams. And we gather, and you get in line, and you walk over to Rice Cycle Stadium, is where we were having the opening ceremonies. And it's this long line of athletes. And you're there, and the Olympic Committee is giving you Oreo cookies and Coke, all these great pre-race food, right? Right before, to kind of satisfy you as you're on your feet the whole time. You finally get to the stadium, and you're standing in line. You're the U.S. team. You're the host country. You're at the back of the line, and you're taking 1 step forward, 2 steps back, and you're on your feet all day. And in 1998, when I was in Japan, I told myself, if I was going to skate 4 more years, and I did qualify for the 5,000 meter, I would not walk in the opening ceremonies. But that all changed the second I got that call. Please welcome Kurt Killinger to the stage. There he is. Yeah, thanks for being here. Kurt was a Port Authority officer whose job it was to bring the World Trade Center flag to Utah. I met him that night. He came out and he protected and watched over that flag with such honor and pride. You could see it. Remember him talking to us and inspiring us, athletes. Out of the 8 athletes that held that flag that night, 5 of us won medals. Kurt's job was to oversee the flag, so he brought it out and unfolded it for the first time, and we all gravitated towards a piece of that flag. And I remember just rubbing the flag, that fabric between my fingers, and the only way I can describe that sensation is that my soul was being touched. It was an incredible feeling. From that moment on, we didn't say a word to each other. And Kurt was trying to pump us up and motivate us, like, when we go out on the stage, there's going to be a huge cheer. Be strong. We're proud of you. The families of the victims are proud of you. All of the world's proud of you. And we were just sitting there with that flag in our hand. We walk out on stage, capacity-filled crowds, 38,000 people in Rice Cycle Stadium, not to mention the 50 million people watching at home. And we were expecting this big cheer, and it was the exact opposite. It was absolute silence. You couldn't hear a thing. We got out on stage, and the national anthem began to play. And towards the end of the national anthem, a gust of wind came up and it was blowing the flag out of our hands. And all I could hear was the voices of those victims. And they were saying to me, I could hear it. They were saying to me, we are with you. We are behind you. We walked off that stage, met up with Kurt again. We folded the flag. We gave it back to him. He put it in its place. I went home that night so inspired and slept with a peace in my heart that I had never known in my 32 years on this earth. I came back the next day and skated my 5,000 meter, and I had this incredible peace about me. I don't know what it was, but I truly believe there was someone else on the ice with me that day. Everywhere I went, there was this warm pocket of air that was almost protecting me. I was in an ice rink, and there's a warm pocket of air wherever I went. I skated the race of my life. Olympics is about something extraordinary. I skated a 15-second personal and briefly held the world record in the 5,000 meter, a race that I'd never been top 10 in ever. And if I was 10th, I was 20 seconds behind the leaders. It was an incredible moment. And I felt the presence of those athletes, of those victims, of my family, of my team behind me. With that silver medal in my pocket, and my daughter just being born, and that peace I had, I came back 10 days later, and this has happened. Please roll the video.
On the outer and on the inner from Canada is Stephen Elm.
Derek Parra, so much fun to watch, Dan, whooping up the crowd before his race. You don't see many skaters doing that. He loves it. He feeds off the energy of the crowd. We'll see if he can come up with another medal here today.
One reason why that time and finish by Parra in the 5,000 was so unexpected, before he broke the world record in that 5,000, he had the 36th fastest time ever before he broke the world record. He comes into this 1,500 with the 14th fastest time for a skater ever. So again, if he's going to be a factor here in the medal stand, he's got to trim a lot off of his time, which used to be the American record before Nick Pearson broke it earlier.
Well, 1:46.20 is Derek Parra's personal best, but Dan, that is misleading. He can skate almost a second and a half faster than that, and he's going to have to do that to medal here today.
With 2 laps left, Derek is about 8/10 ahead of the pace set by Altahaga. And remember, that lightning last lap by Altahaga means that the skaters, if they're going to flirt with that Altahaga time, have to really be well ahead of him with a final lap left.
Well, this is an important lap here, right here for Derek Parra. 1:16.94 was the split for Altahaga. Parra would like to be closer to 1:16.2, maybe better 1:15.5. He's way ahead.
He's nearly a second and a half ahead of Altahaga. So we'll see what Derek Parra has up his sleeve here in the final lap of this 1,500.
Well, Dan, Altahaga's lap was 27.6. All Parra needs to do is skate somewhere around the low 28-second lap. He's going to set another world record here. We'll see what he's got in the last 100 meters.
It was Altahaga who set the world record and stole the gold from Parra in the 5,000. And the time for Parra here is he did a world record. So he returns the favor.
Derek Parra.
I do look bigger on TV. So that's it. I look huge up there. That was an incredible moment for me, made possible by so many people. And, you know, I knew that, but my Olympic moment, which really came true for me and proved that to me, came on the podium that night. I tell people that the World Trade Center flag ceremony defined my games and really taught me what life was about, the meaning of life, how important it is. But my Olympic moment came on the podium that night. And it's different for every athlete, depending on how you get there. But I can remember being backstage. I mean, it was a whirlwind. After I won the race, I think I won the race at 2:30. I had to do a drug test, had to do a press conference, go through the mixed zone, which is basically every television station in the world where you stand there and you answer the same question. How is a Mexican-American from Southern California become an ice speed skater? How is a Mexican-American? You keep going all the way down. And then you have to do all that in a certain amount of time. Otherwise, you could test positive or have a positive test if you don't produce a sample in time for the anti-doping control. And then I got to the stadium that night, and I'm sitting there, and things finally kind of started to wind down and settle. And I remember being brought back out on stage because I hadn't been there since the silver medal. I got my medal, and I remember thinking, like, this is incredible. Like, the crowd was filled. It was like an amphitheater-like stadium. It was incredible to see. And I look in the distance, and I see the American flag started to be raised as the national anthem is being played. Apparently for something that I did. But I knew right then it wasn't about me. As the flags were being raised, someone in the front of the crowd started to sing the national anthem. And it grew. The sound grew. And I started to see in my peripheral vision all the mouths moving in unison. So by midway through the national anthem, I could see everyone singing the national anthem, and I could feel the volume of their voices on my chest. It was an incredible moment. And I blinked my eyes for just a second, and I saw all the people that were on my team, that were behind me. From the time I first put on my first pair of roller skates, back when I was 14, until that day when I laced up my skates before I went out and won that race. No one does it alone. And that I was living proof at that point. I was standing on the shoulders of so many on top of that podium. And it was an incredible feeling. And later on, when talking to the people that you see on stage here, I was talking about that feeling and what they felt at the same time. And we were so connected, emotionally, spiritually, however you want to say it. It was an incredible moment. But my journey's not over yet. I'd like to bring out 2 skaters now. Please welcome Ella Teeples and Casey Dawson. That's Casey. Please have a seat. Thanks for coming. Thanks for coming. Get a little choked up. My journey with the people you see on stage here was incredible, but now one of my greatest rewards in my life now is I'm one of these people in their journey. Casey Dawson, I met him as a young child. I don't have a photo of that, you're lucky. At a Get Out and Play event up in Park City. School's coming in to learn how to skate, speed skate. He loved it, he was hooked. He went through our program at the Utah Olympic Oval and in Park City Club and just came back from China winning a bronze medal in the men's team pursuit. Ella Teeples also came to the Oval in our Learn to Skate program. And from what I'm told, she's a diabetic, you wouldn't know it. She's the most active person. Her mom is always there monitoring her, and she helps with everything, helps with our Learn to Speed Skate program as well. And I believe I was told that she had a choice. She couldn't play hockey because of the dangers with being a diabetic, but she had a choice between figure skating and speed skating, and maybe didn't like wearing the figure skating outfits. She felt more comfortable in a skin suit. So we're happy because she joined the speed skating team, and last year in our club, she became the number 2 young woman at 13 years old in the 3,000 meter in the world. Number 2 in the world in the 3,000 meter. Their journeys have just begun, and I'm very proud and honored to be an accelerator on their path. And my final thoughts I want to leave you with is our words and our actions are so impactful to each other. Each one of you here sitting in this room inspires somebody, whether it's your coworker, your wife, your spouse, your husband, your children, your buddies you play golf with, the girls you go out with at night, whatever it may be. You have to realize that your words have an impact on the people around you, and they can either be positive or negative. I was so blessed and fortunate to have these people on my team. There is no reason why for 20 years I've been trying to figure it out how I got to be on top of that podium. I didn't have the financial means. I don't think physically. I'm 5'4". I'm in a sport of giants. I was on top of the podium. The guys in second and third were still taller than me. In fact, I think the Japanese women were taller than me in 2002. That's saying a lot. So I was able to do that with the help of so many. So when you leave this conference in this room today, think about that. The words and the actions that you have with those around you, they are so powerful. And I wish all of you the best, and I want you all to go out and accelerate your own dreams. Thank you very much for your time.